Why did the ancient Chinese masters in ink studies, Indian epistemology, did not become the foundational methodology of science, while only the formal logic originating from Greece became the source of modern logic, the cornerstone of scientific methodology? Compared to other civilizations, why was ancient Greek civilization able to stand out? How did ancient Greek logic come about? Today, we will use a video to explain the uniqueness of ancient Greek logic. Logic. Its etymology comes from the Greek word logos. Heraclitus once used logos as a philosophical concept. He used logos to refer to the changes and principles of the world. Before this, logos, in the general context of ancient Greek, mostly meant speech and discourse. Speech in ancient Greek city-states was an especially important matter. Among them, Athens is the most representative city-state, Amazia, thanks to the geographical environment around the Mediterranean, Antirata. This makes the Greek city-states naturally isolated, IENIANS. Each city-state must meet its own practical needs, IENIANS fought, establish their own legislation and system. Here people do not have the same as those ancient Oriental despotisms, lost their freedom of speech too early. In the city-state of Athens, at its peak, the population was about 300,000 to 400,000, and the number of citizens did not exceed 60,000. The characteristic of a small country with few people enabled Athens to achieve direct democracy in the public squares of Athens, besides serving as a free trade market. More importantly, it provides for the citizens a place to express their views. It sounds like this: Athens' democratic system seems very good, but in the actual operation process, democracy requires a high level of technical expertise, because the provisions of the law are just a norm. There is a discrepancy between it and the actual situation. In other words, if people do not have the ability to achieve it, or do not have enough conditions to safeguard the rights of citizens, then the legal provisions are just empty talk. Therefore, the Athenians, in safeguarding freedom, made a lot of efforts. A typical example is the Solon reforms. Solon abolished the hereditary privileges of the nobility to prevent them from gradually monopolizing seats in the council. So he abolished the hereditary privileges of the nobility, according to the property and income of citizens, N.A., divided into 4 citizen classes, to encourage people to change their social status by creating wealth, to change their own social status. Solon also established the Assembly of Citizens. From then on, the election of magistrates was directly carried out by the Assembly of Citizens, since the Assembly of Citizens was not a permanent institution. Furthermore, Solon was also concerned that members of the Assembly of Citizens could be bribed. On the other hand, to handle daily affairs, in order to limit the power of the citizen assembly, Solon also established a council of 400 on the hill of Ares. As a permanent institution in Athens, the council was composed of 100 representatives from each of the 4 tribes, as representatives, by those who were most knowledgeable about the actual situation of the city-state, to pre-screen the proposals to be discussed in the citizen assembly. In order to prevent judicial corruption, Solon established citizen juries. Of course, the citizens here do not actually serve as jurors, but rather act as judges. Citizens can judge whether someone is guilty. Therefore, democracy is not an empty concept. It is not just reflected in the laws as citizens' rights. Citizens truly possess these rights. It depends on how it is implemented. Of course, the political system of Athens is also not unchanging. In general, Solon's reforms laid the foundation for the political structure of the city-state of Athens. Since Athens is a direct democracy, meetings are necessary. How to conduct meetings, how to improve the efficiency of meetings, it becomes particularly important. The minds of the ancient Greeks at that time would use a water clock to limit each person's speaking time, so a citizen within the limited speaking time. How to maximize their persuasiveness became the top priority in Athenian political life. In Athens at that time, the profession of sophists gradually emerged. In the history of philosophy, sophists were also known as wise men. They made a living by selling rhetoric. They were often hired by wealthy individuals to be their private tutors. Sometimes, they would also work as advocates for others, charging a certain fee for their advocacy. We must not think of this profession as noble. On the contrary, in ancient Athens, this profession was not considered noble in the eyes of Socrates and other philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. Wise men worked only for payment, to win lawsuits or public debates. They usually stop at nothing. They often rely on their eloquence, distorting right and wrong. For the citizens of Athens, do they really need the so-called rhetoric? Otherwise, what they really need is how to discern truth from falsehood, how to clarify definitions, in order to safeguard their rights as citizens, and not be subject to illegal violations. However, we must admit that not everyone can become a Socrates, or a philosopher like Plato. The majority of citizens are unable to, in public debates, counter these sophists, and even with a slight misstep, they will be confused, deceived, brainwashed. However, Aristotle established a reliable system that precisely shapes the principles of reasoning, known as Aristotle's formal logic, with the most crucial part being the syllogism. The syllogism is indeed an accurate translation, as it can very well explain how the structure of this argument is. However, in my opinion, the syllogism did not translate its essence, because Aristotle's terminology at the time was syllogism. The etymology of reasoning in ancient Greek is ouroi. It is not the meaning of syllogism. Its earliest meaning is collective thinking, collective deduction. In other words, logic has been open and transparent from the beginning. In principle, a means of scrutiny accessible to everyone, as long as we follow fixed and effective rules, carry out general operations, deduce by people, its results should all be consistent. You don't need to be as eloquent as Socrates, let alone be as quick-witted as Plato, or as quick-witted. In principle, you just need to master these rules of reasoning, to have the ability to expose lies and clarify the truth, and reach consensus with others. Later, the successors of the peripatetic school compiled them, calling it instrumentalism. In instrumentalism, mainly consists of 6 works by Aristotle. The logical system of ancient Greece, compared to ancient India, or the logical system of ancient China. What makes it special? By what means? How can it become the foundational methodology of science? In fact, in Aristotle's explanatory works, we can find the significant differences between them. Aristotle, in his explanatory works, analyzed a series of grammatical issues. Yes, grammar is one of the necessary conditions for logic. If the language of a region, TARLET, has a clear and effective grammar system, then it has more favorable conditions for the development of logic. False. If in a certain region, its language, then it may not be able to develop logic. Even if it does develop some argumentative techniques very similar to logic, it is very likely that it cannot evolve into modern logic as we know it today. On the other hand, Aristotelian logic is a typical example of liberal academia. On day N, academic freedom has a crucial feature. Academic freedom. It refers to the pursuit of pure knowledge of things themselves, rather than practical knowledge. In today's terms, it is studying for the sake of studying, pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Any knowledge related to production and livelihood is not what academic freedom concerns. For example, theoretical science and the practical application of science are completely different fields, because theoretical science is pure knowledge, while the practical application of science emphasizes economic benefits. This involves the issue of scientific perspectives. I will make a separate video on this in the future, to explain to everyone. So why Greece? Why could Greece produce such free and noble academic pursuits? Someone once asked Aristotle about this. How did philosophy come about? Note that the philosophy here refers to the philosophy in the context of ancient Greece. It is the love of wisdom. Now, in fact, it includes natural sciences, mathematics, geometry, astronomy, physics, geography, and other disciplines that we have subdivided today. Aristotle answered, philosophy originates from leisure and wonder. The answer is quite obvious. Aristotle believed the free citizens of Greece had time. Only the free citizens, those who were free from the struggle for subsistence, had the ability and the conditions to seek pure knowledge about things themselves, because they did not need to worry whether this knowledge could help them solve their subsistence problems. Secondly, it is the curiosity to delve into the root of problems. In fact, this is related to the political environment of ancient Greek city-states. It is closely related, in an environment that allows questions to be openly disclosed, discussed, and questioned. People naturally have the freedom to do so, without having to bear any potential risks and persecutions. As Einstein said, the emergence of academic freedom, the freedom that must meet 3 conditions to survive. Freedom of speech, freedom of mind. Now let's look back at logic. What logic emphasizes? Not blindly accepting memorization and execution, or unwaveringly believing. Logic emphasizes caution, questioning, and thinking, believing in propositions in a principled way. This is a typical academic freedom. It is a product of the Greek spirit, and also ancient Greek civilization, left as an academic heritage to the